Hello, and welcome back to this week's episode of Reverence for Rêverie, where we are following the hidden threads weaving through our consciousness, those quiet whispers of meaning that shimmer beneath the surface of waking life. I'm Marrissa, your host, and today we're leaning into a question that is both timeless and strangely personal. Why do certain symbols, certain archetypes, keep showing up in our lives? Maybe it's a recurring image in your dreams, a doorway, a wild animal, a stranger whose eyes just feel centuries old. Maybe it's the way you're drawn to a particular character in a novel, or how a film feels like it's echoing something buried deep in your bones. Or maybe it's a moment in life that feels mythic, fated, like the turning point in a story that's somehow your own. This isn't just a coincidence, it's a language, the language of the unconscious, spoken in symbol and metaphor, myth and memory. Carl Jung called this deeper layer the collective unconscious, a shared inner world of ancient stories, universal figures, and psychological blueprints that shape how we move through the world. Today, we'll explore what archetypes are and how they live inside all of us, how symbols from myth, dreams, and art reveal deep psychological truths, and why these universal patterns keep appearing in our lives, guiding us, challenging us, and sometimes quietly calling us home. So, let's step into the symbolic realm, the place where psychology meets poetry and where the soul speaks in images. Now, to understand archetypes, we have to start with Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst who saw the human psyche not just as an individual mind, but as a part of something much larger, a shared, ancient intelligence that he called the collective unconscious. According to Jung, just as our bodies carry genetic memory, those traits that are passed down through generations, our minds carry a symbolic memory. These are universal, inherited structures that shape the way we think, feel, and dream. Imagine them as ancient blueprints etched into the very fabric of our being, a repository of myths, legends, and primordial images that echo across time. Jung called these recurring patterns archetypes, timeless symbols and motifs that appear in myths, fairy tales, religious traditions, and dreams. They are the eternal characters that live inside all of us, like the wise old man, the nurturing mother, the trickster, the hero, or even the shadow that we often avoid. These archetypes serve as guides, offering us clues about who we are and what we might become. They are not static. They evolve as we grow, merging our personal experiences with the deep, resonant pulse of humanity's collective story. Consider how these archetypes surface in the stories we tell. The hero's journey, for example, isn't just a plot in a blockbuster film. It actually mirrors the inner journey each of us embarks on, confronting our fears, transforming our wounds, and emerging more whole. Or think of the nurturing figure that comforts us in our dreams. It might be a reminder of the inner caregiver we all need, a symbol of our own capacity for self-compassion. Jung believed that these archetypes work silently behind the scenes, influencing our perceptions and behaviors without our conscious awareness. They shape our dreams and inspire our creative impulses, offering a bridge between the individual and the universal. By tapping into this collective reservoir, we gain access to wisdom that transcends personal experience, a timeless dialogue with the souls of those who came before us. And while archetypes appear in myths and dreams, they also show up in more unexpected places, like the tarot, for example. It is far from being a fortune-telling tool. The tarot is a symbolic map of the psyche. It is rich with archetypes and meaning. Each card acts like a mirror, helping us project, reflect, and engage with aspects of ourselves that we might not otherwise see. The major arcana, for example, outlines the hero's journey, a symbolic path of transformation that echoes the very psychological processes we undergo in life and in therapy. In many ways, pulling a card is like pulling a thread from the unconscious. It's inviting us into deeper conversation with our inner world. Now, I'm not going to go too far into tarot right now, and we will be exploring the language of the tarot and how it relates to dream work and archetypal psychology in future episodes. But for now, just know that symbols are everywhere, quietly guiding us back to ourselves all the time. In essence, archetypes are the recurring language of the unconscious. They whisper to us through symbols and stories, inviting us to explore the deeper layers of our psyche and to connect with the shared humanity that unites all of us. So imagine for a moment that your psyche is a vast landscape, part temple, part theater. Within it, countless figures live and breathe. Some are familiar, others lurk in the shadows, waiting to be named. These inner characters are what Jung called archetypes, universal patterns of energy, inherited images that shape the way we see ourselves, others, and the world. And there are many archetypes, countless really. They evolve with us, appear in different guises, sometimes overlap, but a few stand out. A few are so deeply embedded in the human experience that we all know them, whether we realize it or not. So I'd like to introduce you to a few of them. These are some of the most basic, common ones. There are, again, so many more. But we'll start with the hero. It's the one who embarks on a journey, like I've mentioned before, faces trials, and transforms in the process. Think Odysseus, King Arthur, Harry Potter, but also think of yourself. Anytime you have faced loss, change, illness, fear, and then kept going, that was your inner hero rising. The hero archetype reminds us that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. Then we have the shadow. It's the hidden, rejected parts of ourselves, the traits we disown, deny, or fear. In myth and story, this often shows up as the villain, like Darth Vader, Medusa, Loki. But in our own lives, the shadow might be the jealousy we don't want to admit, the anger we repress, the vulnerability we hide. Jung believed that the shadow holds immense creative power once acknowledged. Integration, not elimination, is the key. We'll move on to the wise old man or the wise woman. This is the inner guide, the mentor, the voice of deep knowing. And you'll recognize them in figures like Yoda, Gandalf, or the grandmother who told you the truth when no one else would. Sometimes this archetype shows up in dreams or synchronicities, offering wisdom just when we need it. Other times they're found within, quietly guiding from beneath the noise. There's also the anima and animus. These are the inner feminine and masculine energies present within all of us, regardless of our gender. The anima represents intuition, emotion, creativity, and receptivity. The animus symbolizes logic, will, action, structure. These aren't about stereotypical gender roles. They're psychological energies that exist on a spectrum. And when they're out of balance, we may feel disconnected from parts of ourselves or rely too heavily on one way of being. But when they're in harmony, they help us feel whole, able to act and to receive, to lead and to surrender. And finally, we'll talk about the trickster. This is the rebel, the chaos bringer, the sacred disruptor. This archetype breaks the rules, not to harm, but to shake things up, to provoke growth, to free us from our rigid thinking. You'll find the trickster in Loki, Hermes, or the coyote spirit of indigenous lore. But you'll also find it in the friend who calls out your blind spots, in the curveballs life throws just when you've gotten too comfortable. Tricksters unsettle us, but they also initiate change. These are just a few of these archetypal energies that live within us, appearing at different stages of our lives. Sometimes we're the hero, braving the unknown. Other times we're facing our shadow. Some days we seek the wise elder. Other days the trickster is shaking us awake. And here's the thing. These archetypes don't live out there in stories or myths. They live in us. They live in you. They're the patterns behind the scenes, quietly shaping your dreams, your choices, your relationships, and yes, even your fears. And sometimes these archetypes don't just show up in stories or in the lives of others. They appear to us directly in a dream or a meditation, as if stepping out from behind the veil. I remember one moment like this vividly. During a meditation, the image of the wise old man came to me. Now, I didn't recognize him as that at the time, but now, as I look back, I do see him as that archetype now. He was everything that you might expect from myth. Elderly, wizard-like, a long white beard, a pointed hat, and a flowing robe. And he didn't speak a single word to me, but his presence was unmistakable. In this meditative imagery, he guided me down a spiral staircase. And in my own psyche, this spiral has come to symbolize descent into the unconscious. And it's a symbol that I use often in sessions with my patients. This was an invitation to understand more of myself, to go deeper. But here's what unfolded. As we descended, I began to sense that we were also ascending. Somehow we were moving both downward and upward at one time. The journey was mirrored in both directions. And that imagery has stayed with me strongly because that spiral represented something essential. The deeper I go into the places that I fear, into grief, into shadow, into the unspoken parts of myself, the more I am able to expand. The more fully I feel the sorrow, the more fully I'm able to feel joy. The more deeply I feel my rage, the more deeply I feel my heart break open in love. And the more I understand my own darkness, the more spiritually whole I become. It was a message in symbols, not words, but unmistakable still. And in that moment, the wise old man was not just a concept. He was a felt presence, guiding me inward so that I could rise higher. This is the power of archetypes. They carry wisdom that we may not even know we need until they show up in just the right form at just the right time. Now, not all archetypes arrive cloaked in robes of wisdom. Some come snarling, feral, and entirely unexpected. It's bringing to mind a dream that I will not forget. I had this during a time in my life when I was deep in the throes of motherhood, completely immersed in caregiving and endless cycles of laundry and dishes and daily responsibilities. In the dream, I was standing in a room holding a laundry basket. And that's such a simple, ordinary symbol. But what came next was anything but ordinary. The room itself was striking. Barren, large, sterile white walls. It felt like I was in some kind of zoo enclosure with massive glass windows lining the walls, as though others could peer in and observe. And yet there was only one exit, and I was standing in front of it. That's when I realized that I was not alone. Locked in the room with me was an alligator, a huge alligator, but not just any alligator. This one was wearing bright red lipstick. It lunged at the laundry basket, tearing into it with a wild, feral energy. Now, at first glance, this image was absolutely absurd, like almost comical. But I knew there was something deeper happening. So when I sat with it, I realized that the alligator wasn't just a random creature. It was the repressed wild feminine, a part of me that had been caged, silenced, and locked away. A part that didn't fit the neatly folded, perfectly managed image of motherhood that I was holding, literally, in my arms. The lipstick was a clue too. It was a symbol of feminine expression, sensuality, even theatricality. But placed on an alligator, it became uncanny, almost monstrous. This wasn't the kind of femininity that's easy to digest. This was the raw, instinctual, untamed force of nature that had been forced into exile within me. And now it was clawing its way back into consciousness, attacking the very structure that had been containing it. And that room, it was bright, empty, and on display. It said something too. It mirrored how exposed and yet how isolated that part of me had become. Seen but not known. Visible but not understood. With only one exit blocked by me. It was a confrontation, one I could no longer avoid. This is the power of archetypes in dreams. This alligator isn't just an animal. It was the wild woman, the instinctual self, the part of me that refused to be domesticated. It held elements of Lilith, the dark goddess exiled from Eden, of Kali, the fierce mother who destroys to recreate, and of the trickster too, wearing lipstick like a mask, forcing me to confront what I had hidden not only from the world, but from myself. Dreams don't come to flatter us. They come to wake us up. And sometimes the part of us that's been locked away the longest is the one that shows up loudest when the psyche is ready to evolve. Now, of course, archetypes don't just live in myths or dreams. They walk with us every day in the choices we make, the people we meet, and the roles we find ourselves inhabiting again and again. Think about a moment in your life when everything was changing. Maybe you stood at a crossroads, unsure which path to take. Maybe something had to end so something else could begin. Or maybe you felt like you were being called into something bigger than yourself, without a map, without certainty, only the sense that the story no longer fit. That's an archetypal moment, a lived initiation, one where we're no longer just a person going through something. We become the hero, the seeker, the initiate, or the wanderer. Life begins to feel like a story unfolding, and we can sense that we're experiencing echoes of something ancient, something universal. I experienced this firsthand during my postgraduate training in psychoanalysis. It was the focus of a paper I wrote called The Psychoanalytic Initiate, and it remains one of the clearest moments in my life where the archetype of the initiate made itself known. Becoming a psychoanalyst isn't just about intellectual rigor or professional identity. It truly is an initiation, a grueling, beautiful, and at times disorienting journey. One that asks you to come apart, to face the parts of yourself that you've long avoided, to sit in the unknown, and to surrender your certainty. It was as though I was being ritually deconstructed, layer by layer, and in that process, something else began to emerge. A deeper sense of self, a fuller embodiment of who I am, not just professionally, but personally, spiritually. I found myself stepping into more confidence, more groundedness, more trust in my own voice and my own vision. And at the same time, I felt more connected to something vast, something sacred and expansive. This was not just some training. It was a sacred initiation for me, a passage into deeper knowing, and not just of the mind, but of the soul. Our relationships, too, are shaped by archetypes. The parent and the child, the lover and the beloved, the guide and the student, even our conflicts when we feel abandoned, betrayed, challenged, or transformed, often mirror mythic dynamics. We're not just having a fight or falling in love, we're stepping into a timeless dance, one that has played out across centuries in every culture, in every psyche. Jung believed that archetypes show up when the psyche is ready for growth, that they emerge not to trap us in old patterns, but to show us something about who we've been and who we are becoming. There's something deeply comforting about that, isn't there? To know that whatever we're facing, we're not the first, and that others have walked this path before us and left clues along the way, stories, symbols, dreams. Archetypes are the threads that connect us, not just to each other, but to something greater than ourselves. So, how do we begin to work with archetypes consciously, beyond theory, beyond symbolism, but as living forces in our everyday lives? Well, the first step is to listen. Archetypes don't shout, they whisper. They shimmer just beneath the surface of things, waiting to be noticed. Pay attention to recurring symbols. If a particular image keeps showing up in your dreams, in the books you're drawn to, in conversations that echo one another, pause and ask yourself, what is this image trying to reveal to me? What part of me is being stirred? Archetypes will often arrive as repetition, synchronicity, or that mysterious feeling of déjà vu. Sometimes it's not even an image at all. It might be a song that keeps finding its way into your ears, a phrase you keep hearing, or a work of art that brings you to tears for reasons that you just can't quite name. Art is one of those most powerful mirrors of the archetypal world. Music, poetry, film, these are all languages of the unconscious where archetypes speak through rhythm, color, symbol, and emotion. And here's where things get really fascinating. While I absolutely choose to embrace the mystery and magic of synchronicity, in fact, it is my preferred stance, there's also a neurological explanation that deepens the picture. The brain's reticular activating system, a network in the brainstem that filters information, helps determine what we pay attention to. Once something registers as meaningful, even unconsciously, the RAS begins filtering the world through that lens. It's why when you're thinking about a certain symbol, story, or idea, you start seeing it everywhere. Or, the classical, you buy a new car, and suddenly you're seeing that new car all over the place on the road or in the parking lots. It's not necessarily new. It's that your brain has now tuned you into it, as if you've just adjusted the dial on a radio and now you're hearing that signal loud and clear. So when archetypal material arises in your life, you may notice more synchronicities, and not because they weren't there before, but because now you're aligned with them. You're listening. Notice your roles in different seasons of life. Are you stepping into the hero's journey? Are you confronting your shadow? Are you being called to be a wise guide for someone else? Life invites us into these archetypal roles over and over and over again, each time with new nuance and new growth. Also, explore myths and stories that resonate deeply with you, the ones that haunt you a little, the ones that move you to tears without quite knowing why. Those stories are clues, portals into your own psyche. Maybe it's the tale of Persephone and her descent into the underworld, or the journey of the fool in the tarot. Maybe it's a modern novel or a childhood fairy tale. Whatever it is found you for a reason. Journal about the figures that stay with you, the dream character that you just can't forget, the stranger who offered a single line that shifted your entire day, the inner figure who appears in meditation or reverie. Archetypes will live in these encounters. Write about them, speak to them, ask them questions. You might be surprised at what answers come. When we begin to engage with archetypes not as just abstract concepts, but as living companions, parts of ourselves calling for recognition, our lives begin to change. We start to see the symbolic nature of our entire experience, the deeper narrative underneath the surface of all of our days. We begin to see life not just as a sequence of events, but as a sacred unfolding, a myth in motion, a story with soul. So what if your life isn't just a series of disconnected moments, but a myth unfolding in real time? What if the challenges you're facing aren't only obstacles, but initiations? And what if the symbols that keep showing up, those strange dreams, the songs you can't stop hearing, the figures you meet in meditation or story, aren't random at all, but messengers from the deeper self? Archetypes aren't abstract ideas. They are living forces. They shape how we love, how we fear, how we rise, and how we remember who we are. And when we begin to notice them, when we pay attention, we step into a different relationship with life itself, one that is alive with meaning, with pattern, and with presence. You don't need to understand every symbol all at once. You only need to start listening, noticing, asking, what part of me is showing up here? What story am I living inside of? What is this moment asking me to become? Maybe you're in a breakup and feeling shattered. Maybe you're stepping into a new role at work and doubting your abilities. Maybe you've just had a child, or you've lost someone you love. These are thresholds. You're crossing into new terrain, and the archetypes are walking with you. The unconscious is not separate from you. It is you, just in a different form. It speaks in symbols, in sensations, in archetypal roles. It whispers through dreams and art and poetry. It dances just below the surface, waiting for you to turn toward it. So as you move through your day, continue to ask those questions. Who am I being right now? The hero? The caregiver? The shadow? The trickster? And what would it mean to greet that part with curiosity, with reverence, and with compassion? We are not meant to walk this life asleep. Archetypes help wake us up to ourselves, to the stories we carry, and to the greater myth that we are all a part of. Thank you so much for joining me today for this episode of Reverence for Rêverie. And if today's conversation stirred something in you, I would love to hear from you. You can reach out to me on Instagram at Reverie_the collective, or email me at reveriecollectiveteam@gmail.com. And if you want to go deeper into these ideas like dream work, symbolism, the language of the soul, please subscribe to the Reverie Collective Journal on Substack. You'll find extended reflections, journal prompts, poetry that I've written, and just general space to explore more deeply. I'll link that in the show notes. Until next time, trust the symbols that find you, trust the myth that you're living, and as always, let the reverie lead you.